Welcome to Leading and Meeting in a Pandemic World. I'm Ravi Tangri, and I am absolutely delighted to have with me today Jennifer Spear, who is a fellow facilitator. She's recovering from working in the corporate world and likes to work with people in learning how to lead unscripted. So tell me a little bit more about that, Jen.
Hi. Well, thanks, Ravi, for inviting me here. Sure. So I talk about being unscripted. And so that's really about how we can take advantage of change. Because when things change and we have to go off the plans that we were using before, we have to be able to be comfortable and confident to be able to lead properly. And that's certainly the environment that we're in today. Absolutely everything has changed.
Oh, and yeah, absolutely. The scripts are gone. I think we're
Yeah.
playing improv in every industry right now.
Absolutely, and that speaks well because that's my background is within improv, and so being able to use the principles and skills of improv will help us feel more comfortable with the uncertainty and the ambiguity that accompanies change, and make us just feel more confident and at ease to be able to respond in the moment. Because as you said, there are no scripts anymore, right? We had to throw those out, and we're writing new ones together.
That's fascinating that you've got background in improv because I found for myself the best training, the best resource I ever had to be a facilitator was actually improv training because you have to be able to respond in the moment. You never know what's coming at you.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating that you've got the same sort of background.
Absolutely, and I recommend it to everybody.
And it's so much fun.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I should mention this is right now we're streaming live on Facebook and on YouTube. If you are watching it live, you can put your comments into either of those platforms, questions, insights, any ahas, any challenges around this, and we can bring your comments into the conversation. We'll also be uploading this into LinkedIn, into the Leading and Meeting in the Pandemic World group. And if you've got any comments there, Jen and I will be, I'm sure, checking that and be able to respond to you. But if you're watching live on Facebook or on YouTube right now, please put your comments in, and we can bring that right into the conversation.
Because
So
this is an unscripted conversation, so certainly we would welcome any thoughts or comments from everybody.
I'm suddenly tempted to throw something at you from an improv
I
point
can
of view.
catch it. Wait, I can catch it.
Love it. So what we want to get into today is how leadership is actually being exposed in this time.
Mhm.
This is a time where you are being called as a leader to really step up and step up your game. And maybe perhaps to set a bit of context for this, just want to share with you there's a couple of roles in leadership. The first is dealing with a task focus where you're concerned about getting the job done. Let's get her done. Let's move forward. The other is relationship, about how are the people working? How are they doing? And I think if we're honest with ourselves before all of this hit, the focus really for most organizations was largely task oriented. And in a lot of cases, there was only lip service given to individuals. Now, we're going to get into this. I believe there's a shift coming, or a shift that has happened, where we need to lean much, much more heavily into the relationship, into taking care of our people. And this is where the leadership is really going to rise to the game. Would you agree with that summary, Jen?
Oh, absolutely. And when we're talking about leadership exposed, it's kind of we're going to be able to see the bad leadership now. So the fact that people are at home and they're having to work remotely, while it may seem like you just want to stay focused on tasks, make sure that everybody knows what they do, and you've got, your to-do list for the entire team. But now is really the time that we need to be focused on the individuals. So focused on that relationship. People we're all experiencing this, but we're all experiencing it differently. And everyone is now having to do the tasks, but from home. And even those that are experienced at working remotely, things have changed for them. So it could be that their family members are now at home. It could be that their children are at home. And so we're expecting them to be able to manage the day-to-day as well as everything else. And it's very emotional. There's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. The fact is, we're seeing now, I think even more than ever, that work is just a part of somebody's life, and that we get to see into that person's life now because we're all working remotely and using technology to be able to do that. And so I think we really need to take care of our people, make sure that they're okay. And I think that relationship piece is so important now. And for those that had set it up ahead of time, right? Those that had good leadership ahead of time, I think they're well set up for this environment. But those that were very task oriented now, I think they need to make that shift and to be able to focus on the individuals. Because if we do that, if we make them feel cared for and supported, if there's trust, then I think we'll actually see the tasks get done better.
Well, and it's not just about the the learning to work and all. Like, one of the things I find really interesting is now, you're having all these meetings on Zoom, and you've got cats walking in and out of it, kids running around. That's become a new norm, which is a stressor to people who are used to in the work environment. You're focused on work, right? And now everything is blurred. But also, it's not just work. I mean, this is a hugely stressful and uncertain time. We don't know, when we're going to get out of lockdown. We don't know what the risk is. All of these things people are going through personally, but they still need to process that, and leaders need to support them in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that you said about being wanting to separate work and personal. And a lot of people, that's very important for them. So they have work, they don't bring work home. They've got home, they don't bring it into work. And now, as you said, their cats and their kids are walking by the camera. We are actually invading our employees' homes now, asking them to bring work in. They're having to work with us while they're homeschooling their kids or dealing with any of the other issues that they're dealing with. And that can be really tough, but it also means that it's a much more intimate relationship, an intimate discussion that you're having with people, because you're actually having that conversation in their living room, right? It's quite amazing that way.
It is. And in the old days, before
That was what, a month ago? Yeah, right.
months ago, yeah. Sometimes people would say, well, you have a work life and a home life. And that's never been true. There's only one life, and they bleed over. And now that's become like 10 times more explicit.
Yeah. And it's interesting, though. For some, they have been fighting for this for years in terms of wanting to be able to work remotely, and the companies couldn't figure out how to do it. And can we trust our people? Will they get the work done? And I know for a friend of mine who works for a very large company, and all of a sudden everyone was working at home, and they are getting so much done. Their decision making is much more nimble. They're making decisions quickly. They're supporting each other. And it's amazing to all of them how much work is getting done because they were forced to figure it out.
Right.
Right. And so if we go back to improv, what we would call that is an offer. So when something happens, when there's change, if you're thinking about an improv scene, when somebody says or does something, that's considered an offer. And we have to accept that offer. Now, this pandemic was one of the biggest offers we've ever had. And we had to accept it and figure out how we were going to work within this new environment.
And that's, I think, a key is a lot of people have tried to do things the same way.
Right.
We're being invited to do is, new things. And one of your fans is on board, Jen. You've got Sandy Slater saying,
Oh,
talk that
Sandy
you are
Slater.
an
Yeah.
expert without a script.
Yeah. And Sandy is having to negotiate and navigate other kinds of changes. So in terms of working from home, and Sandy, I'm going to out you right now, having a flood in her house
Oh, good Lord.
yesterday, right? And so and having to deal with all of that while you're trying to live a productive life, right? And she had to, throw all the towels on the floor just to catch the water. And so recognizing that this is what we're dealing with, like those kinds of things in the environment.
Right. And, added to that, the fear of going grocery shopping even.
Right,
Uh,
right. So these things that are normal activities for us, suddenly we're having to make so many decisions about them. It's exhausting.
mhm.
And so I'm sure you've heard everyone's been saying that, a meeting online is very different than a meeting in person, and it gets very tiring at the end of the day. But
Oh,
then
people
you get your
really,
regular life and you have to make all these decisions. Like, do I go to the grocery store? Do I have to wear a mask? Is that person sick? Can I go there? Can I park here? What's appropriate? It's exhausting having to make all of these additional decisions every day.
yeah, and having to homeschool kids for some people and
Yeah.
everything else, and taking care of sometimes parents and being worried about them in long-term care. All of these things are what people are carrying, and they're bringing that to work because you talked about being exhausted. You can be burned out after 4 hours of Zoom meetings in a day,
Right.
totally burned out. You can't expect a full day of work.
Yeah. And I think we are putting kind of difficult expectations on people. If we want them to be in like um, online meeting after meeting, that you have to be on and focus, but you're also, how do I look? How do I sound? And then having to deal with everything that's going on around, the cats and the kids.
Huh?
And it is absolutely exhausting. And
And I,
so for sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and then they can't get up in the middle of a meeting because they've got pajama bottoms on.
Right. But I'm glad to see your dress today, Ravi. That's
Thank you.
wonderful. See, I'm still like, it's still a wonder with me. You don't know, do you? You don't. But what I think is interesting for you and I, and so we're both speakers, right? And so we spend a lot of our times at the front of rooms at conferences and events. And so we're having to see a huge change to that. Our industry was rocked in
Yes.
such a big way.
Well, it disappeared
Well,
overnight.
absolutely. But we're trying to reinvent. But what's when you said we're trying to do exactly the way we did it before, and now we're just doing it virtually, we're seeing that with conferences. So they're saying, okay, we had a 3-day conference. So now we're just going to do a 3-day conference online, and we're going to expect everyone to attend for 8 hours and do the networking and the
Not
social and
possible.
everything else. And we just can't. Like, we need to rethink it. So it's a part of that accepting the offer is recognizing what are the unique what's the unique situation, unique qualities, unique constraints, and then how might we create the best experience in that? How might we create the best virtual experience as opposed to how can we take a live experience and make it virtual?
Well, and that's the thing. I find it interesting. You and I are both facilitators as well as
Yeah.
speakers. I firmly believe now that all meetings, all conferences need to be facilitated. It's about engagement, keeping it relevant, and you need to move people because they can't keep that focus. It's got to stay focused. So even a keynote, I think, instead of 45 minutes, could be 3 15-minute chunks with breakout groups in between about applying that and making it relevant.
Yeah, and part of it is, because we need to be able to focus. We don't want to be bombarded with information, but there's also a lot of distractions that are
Mhm.
possible, right? So
Yep,
I could be checking, I'm not, but I could be checking my email while you're talking, right? But I'm not doing that, Ravi. I'm
I
listening
appreciate
to
that.
everything that you say.
Keeping an eye on you.
Right? But that's absolutely normal to do that. And we think we're good multitaskers, right? So we check our emails, we look at Facebook, we feed the dog, but then we're not able to really stay focused, take the information in. But if we can break it up into chunks and then make it relevant to the person, so actually have them apply it, do some thinking, not just be passive, but
Yeah.
be involved in it. Because this is really a passive medium, right? To be
Right.
able to sit back and listen. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, when you're dealing with all of those things juggling, I love the idea that you're saying, and I really firmly believe that we have an opportunity here to break new ground.
Mhm.
And just before we move to this, I should say, if there are any particular challenges or concerns you have about leading or working in this environment, put them into the comments so that we can respond to them. There's a framework in complex change that nobody invented. They went around and looked at people and interviewed people who were already masters at it. And what they uncovered was a pattern that for complex change that happens. And if I just bring this out here,
Your
uh,
flip chart, a facilitator after my own heart.
yeah,
I've
does that
got my
make you feel at
Sharpie.
all? So if you are here and this is your vision or your goal, it could be that you're just trying to get to doing things the way you've always done it, but really it's what is the output. Okay. What a lot of people do is, okay, we're here, we're there. You just draw a straight line and go, right? Okay, we're going to have a meeting, let's have a Zoom meeting, we're going to do this. But the reality is that's going to create more problems than when you started. There's been significant change, and you really need to understand what's going on. And one of the things is this is new ground, everybody, including the leaders. And leaders have to be honest with themselves to admit they don't know the answers. And I think there's a rise in what I've called co-creative leadership, where you have to engage others to come up with those new ways. And this process that people found, it's called the U process. And what it's about at its simplest is slowing things down to sense into what's really going on. What is it we really need? What's really shifted? What is it that our customers are asking for? And so on. Then you invest the time to be present with that, to find out what's really going on from all this mess of problems. It's sort of like you feel under it to what's the essence of the problem, so we're really fixing it. Then you move up the U to realizing, so you're actually solving the real problem, not the symptoms. It's sort of like taking an aspirin for a headache, but you haven't addressed the brain tumor, right? And what I think we're being called to do is to work with our people to slow things down. What's going on? What do we need to do? How does it work? Instead of just trying to transfer it to online, what really needs to be done? Because honestly, let's be brutally honest, a lot of meetings that went on in the past didn't have to. And then once you get an idea what's the real problem, then you move to action. But then you've engaged everybody in that. I don't know. Your thoughts on the U and its
Yeah.
relevance here?
No, I absolutely agree. And we want to be very quick. We want to move straight to action. And with some people, when there's uncertainty and the changes coming around, they move even faster. But you could be going in the wrong direction. So it doesn't matter how fast you get somewhere if you are going in that wrong direction. So we need to take that time and slow down and look at it differently, because it's not just about doing the same things at home. Are we doing the right things? Are
Yes.
these the things that are still going to matter? Because if you serve a certain customer group who now have to work differently, well, that means that you've got to work differently in order to meet their needs.
Yeah.
So you need to spend time to understand your employees, but also your
That's
customers, what's
all
going on
this.
in their world. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And then once you are clear and you share that vision with your employees, you'll be able to move together, right, to
Yeah.
be able to accomplish something. And it's interesting, because I would have said one of the keys, or one of the things that are exposed in terms of when people go home, in terms of bad leadership, would have been a bad leader doesn't have a vision or doesn't share the vision.
Mhm.
And so that you can see people kind of floundering. Once they get home, they're not really sure what to do because the vision had never been shared with them. And I think that's still true. However, the vision may need to change. And I think it should be co-created with those that are
Absolutely.
doing the work. Yeah.
Well, we own what we create, right?
Yeah.
And we've got Patricia has popped in. She was agreeing. She's watching us on YouTube about facilitation is the key to keeping in participants engaged. And Jennifer, there are so many more distractions with online viewing. And Patricia, I know I had her on a show just a week ago speaking about resilience. And so she's working with people in trying to build that resilience to work through all this.
Yeah, that's a key skill. It was always, but now even more than ever. And that resilience of being able to move forward even when things are not clear, when there's uncertainty, feeling confident in yourself and your abilities to be able to do that. And part of that comes back to the leadership in terms of if you feel supported, if you feel that you can trust your leader, you'll be more likely to feel like you can get through this. But if you're not being supported, if they don't have your back, if you've always questioned that, it's going to come out loud and clear in this environment.
There's an online program that I have that was one of the participants was put in the comments that they had challenges with self-confidence, and their boss, in the middle of all this going on, did a drive-by in a good way of her home and dropped off a succulent with a card that said, "COVID sucks." But then you open it, but you don't. Thank you for
Oh,
all the amazing things that you're doing, right? So a little thing like that, oh my God, it transformed everything, right?
it's the little things are what matters now more than ever,
Yeah,
right? Because of what's going on, we're feeling kind of like we're back to those basics, right?
yeah.
And those little things, knowing that somebody cares about you, and it doesn't take much. So I love that example.
Well, you know, the old analogy they had about a relationship, it's like a bank account, right? If you don't put in, you can't ask for help and get a withdrawal. And I think right now is the time for leaders to put in to their relationships with their people
Yeah,
so that in the long haul they can produce. Because if you just try to make people move, you're just going to burn them out.
yeah.
It's as simple as that.
I had a conversation last week with one of my favorite clients, and one of my favorite people, really. And I've always thought of her as one of the most natural people managers that I've ever met. And I've told her that if I'm ever looking for a boss again, I would hire her to be my boss. And so she always was really good at that balance between that task and relationship bit. And her group were used to working remotely. Many of them did. Now she works for one of the largest banks in Canada, and it's a very busy environment. And her people support the rest of the bank in terms of employee experience and technology. So all of a sudden, 30,000 people are now working at home, right? So it's not just this team working at home; they're having to support everybody else.
Right.
And prior to all of this, they would have weekly check-ins where everyone would share what their priorities were, what they were working on. The team's about 25 people. It would take about 20 minutes for them to do this. The first week that they were all at home, she had the check-in. And this time she asked, "But how are you? So don't tell me about the work. How are you?" They ended up talking for about 90 minutes.
Yeah.
They've now continued this every week. So they have the task check-in, and separately they have the personal check-in. Now it hasn't been 90 minutes every week. It's actually getting shorter. People are feeling more confident. But it's recognizing even those that were used to working at home, this is a whole different world that's going on right now. And they all know that she has their back,
Yeah.
and they're willing to step up. And this is a great team. I've had an opportunity to work with them. They're high performing. They take a lot of pride in their work. And part of that is that safety and security that they know their boss is always going to support them. She's got their back. She cares about them as individuals. That makes getting the task done a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, there's a friend of mine I actually wrote a case study about. He did amazing things to transform this office. and it was about 20, 30 people. And one of the things he did, this was once things were underway and he had got them engaged, because it was an incredibly disengaged office, and he transformed it into being incredibly productive. And once things were moving, he brought in something that most people go, whoa, when I tell them about this. You could never do that. That's so much time. Every Friday morning, there was a 3-hour meeting where everyone who was in the office had to be there. And it was not about work. It was, he called it a Wiffle Sea Meeting. What I feel like saying is, and it's what's going on with you, what's happening in your life, and they went around the table, and people go, oh my God, I couldn't do 3 hours. That's, how could he? And yet that's the reason he was so productive. He allowed his people to share what happened with them. He supported them. But what's interesting is some of the more forward-thinking people in the programs that I've delivered saying, well, I can't do 3 hours, but you know what? I can do a pizza lunch once a week and take my whole team out. And this is no work. We're just checking with what's happening with everybody. And that's investing in the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Regardless of what work we do, it requires people to do it, right? And so being able to connect with them on a personal level, on an emotional level, is so important. And again, if you feel connected and supported, you're more likely to do good work on your own. So, I mean, when we're looking at this in terms of the good leadership, bad leadership, that emotional intelligence piece is so important. And it can still be done remotely. Like, it still can be done through the computer, through the camera, with people. It's not about hugging everybody all the time,
No.
but it is about the empathy and the understanding of what they're going through and communicating that.
Yeah. So tell me, Jennifer, why do you think, I think leadership has come really to the fore. I mean, the call for leadership with this, with situation we're in with the pandemic. Why do you think leadership was not as critical before the pandemic?
I don't know if it wasn't as critical, but I think it could be, bad leadership could have been hidden a lot easier before, especially if the person was very task focused. So as long as the team showed up and they did their work, nobody complained. The people were probably not connected to the work, not connected to those around them. And as long as you're getting results, we don't really care how you do it.
Right.
So, we've had this for years where we've got like the star salesperson, right? Who's just an arrogant, annoying person that no one wants to be around, but it's tolerated because he gets results,
Right.
right? The leader who focuses on tasks rather than people, who takes credit for what their people do, might always get promoted. But it doesn't mean that they're a good leader, right?
And I think that's a key piece there, because what would happen is someone would come in, and I've seen this at all levels, from lower level managers up to CEOs of corporations. They come in, they push, and they create results in a year or two, and then they get promoted out
Yeah.
before the burnout from all they did takes root, right?
Oh yeah, you can see the wake, after
Yeah.
they leave, when people are shaken. I mean, I know I've had bad leaders. Have you ever worked for a bad boss?
Yes. In fact, the last time it happened, I quit. I said, I'm not going to work for an idiot.
Yeah.
I walked
And
away.
and I think if we were to ask everyone, have you worked for a bad boss? We all have, which means there's a lot of bad bosses out there. And for some people, if they haven't worked for a good boss, they don't know the difference. And so
Yeah.
they don't know what it feels like to be able to contribute and feel a part of something and a part of a team. But if you have had a good boss, if you worked in a good team environment, you hold on to that tight, right?
And the good news is, I mean, this is about behaviors. So even
Mhm.
if someone's leadership is, or feels nervous about their leadership, or if it's not as strong as it could be, you absolutely can shift it by changing your behaviors.
Yeah. Absolutely. And once you're aware of them, and I think again, it's this environment that's going to make us a little bit more aware. Um, it's if you haven't communicated vision very well,
Hmm.
and then you've got everybody working from home, they're not really sure maybe why they're doing something. Maybe they have been told what to do. They might have even been told how to do it. And that works for a bit, but as soon as you're faced with something like this, where there's change, where something interrupts that usual script of what it is that we're working on, if your people don't have an understanding of what that vision is, if you haven't shared it with them, they're not going to be able to contribute to
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And I think that's the real opportunity now, is that, no one's got the answers. Like if anyone who professes to move out and say, I know how we're going to run things here, I'm sorry, I have difficulty believing that. I think if you can say, look, I don't know what to do, how do we find the way through?
Right.
That's where the real opportunities lie.
Yeah, back to that co-creation, and being able to have the humility to say I don't have all the answers, because back in the old days, right, a month ago, we could, some leaders would fake it, right, in terms of they know best, they hold tightly to the status quo, they don't invite change, anything new. Nobody has gone through this before,
Yeah.
right? No one. It is unprecedented, to use that word that's been used a lot, but it really is, and we're all having to figure it out. And the more you can admit to that, in terms of I don't know, but here's what I think. What do you think? To be able to co-create it together, I think is where we're going to get some really powerful results.
And thank you. You used unprecedented. Thank you for not saying pivot.
Well, then we have to drink, don't we? Isn't that the
That's the drinking game, right? Uh, so I think I really think this is a huge opportunity. Number one, for leaders to up their game. And tell me
Mhm.
if I'm wrong, what your experience has been in your consulting work. But I have found the real leaders are always saying, okay, how do I improve? Is there a way? The ones that say, what are you talking about, my leadership? I know what it is. I've been doing. They're the ones who actually are the ones that are the leaders that their employees roll their eyes about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the best skill a leader can have is the ability and the willingness to learn,
Hmm.
right? To be open-minded. And whether that's learning a new skill or not, just being open to not thinking that you know it all. Because if you do and change happens, you're not going to be ready for it, because it's not going to react to your old systems and your old scripts and the way you used to do things. You have to be open to be able to see the newness, see the opportunity, and say, huh, here's a new offer. How might I perform well in this environment? And who can I ask for help?
Right.
Right. And that willingness to be able to ask for help. Because as a leader, you shouldn't feel that you have to have all the answers.
And you can't. And
No.
honestly, I don't know that we ever really did. In the last 20 years, things have changed so much,
Yeah.
right? Now it's very clear.
Yeah.
So, so that's the number one, to up the game in leadership. But also, I think there's huge opportunity to co-create new ways of moving forward that are incredibly efficient. Like a lot of my work is around reinvention rather than
Mhm.
process improvement. Let's push the process out and say, if we were starting new, how do we get from A to B? How would we do it? Forget the way it's been done.
Yeah.
And I found only three reasons for going in the black box of the way it was done are: number one, to actually calculate the cost so that you can use that as a 2x4 to whack management upside the head of how much money is being wasted. Number two, to make sure you're not throwing out any processes that actually add value.
Mhm.
And number three, to show how much you've improved at the end, right? I find that reinvention is often way easier than process improvement.
Well, it can be, because if you're trying to fit what you've always done the way you've always done it and just introduce something new. Now you've got to play with things. You'll hear people say, well, that won't work, or, that's not the way we've always done it, and that can get in the way. Whereas if you're doing something brand new, there are no rules yet, right?
Yeah.
We can figure that out. And so if you can get people in that frame of mind where they're totally open, and now I got to tell you, now's the time to do it. A
Yes.
crisis is a terrible thing to waste, right? So right now, people, you don't have to like whack them over the side of the head with that 2x4. You don't have to say what if. You're saying just take a look around you. Things have changed. So knowing that things have changed, what could we do differently? And I love the question that you said in terms of if we were to do it, if we were to start this business again today, what would it look like? What would it be like? And there might be a bunch of things that we used to do that we don't need to do anymore.
Yeah. And Patricia's on board with that. The real leaders invite co-creation,
Yeah.
collaboration, and reinvention, and are open to learning and asking for help.
Thanks, Patricia.
So, Jen, if people are looking to find you and such, if they want to get in touch with you, could you share a little bit more about the type of work that you're doing and that you're focused on in this time?
Sure. Well, if you're looking for me, I'm at home. And I hope you all are too, and that you're safe and that you're healthy. But my company is called Clean Slate, and so that name comes from a number of different places, and one to what you were just talking about, Ravi, in terms of let's start with a clean slate and look at something new, as opposed to trying to figure out how we could do it the way it has always been done. So let's start with a clean slate. And so my work has always been about being able to not just adapt to change, but to take advantage of change. And now is such an important time for this, because we've never experienced anything like this in terms of the amount of change. So we don't have to ask any hypotheticals anymore. It can be, okay, here is the reality. What do we need to do? And so the work that I do is really around that mindset piece in terms of being open to change. And then going through the creative thinking, the creative problem solving, the strategic planning, to be able to stop following the scripts we used to follow, to be able to write our own scripts. And I do use improv in my work because it is such a useful tool, and the skills and the principles of it to help us be open to uncertainty, to help us co-create, to collaborate, to be able to create something together that we wouldn't be able to do alone. And so at this time, it's being done remotely. So it's being done with conversations with clients, with their teams. It is speaking at conferences and helping people feel comfortable and confident dealing with the uncertainty, because we have to do that first before we can do anything else. So as long as we can feel confident and we can say, I got this, then we'll be able to move forward to be able to accomplish something great.
See, I knew there was a reason I liked you. We're so simpatico in all of this. So that is your website there, workunscripted.com, that people can get a hold of you. And of course, you're on LinkedIn and such, so you're pretty easy to get a hold of.
Yes. Yeah. And happy to have a conversation with anybody anytime about this, because it is big, and change. And so whether it is that you're trying to help your team through change, or you're trying to figure out how you can do it yourself, these are really good conversations for us to have now.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the perfect time.
Yeah.
So something else I want to mention before we run out of time is there's a resource for your people and for yourself that I've created with a friend of mine in Nashville, Chris Bauer, called it's a 21-day program, 21 Days to Surrender. It's basically a program to deal with the anxiety, how to start to lift the anxiety and the stress and step out of that, to be able to reconnect with your own power, your own energy. And it's free. So feel free to pass around the link, getridofthestress.com,
I'm writing
available
it
for
down.
you, for your people, just go there, sign up. 21-day program, tiny bite-sized modules that take like minutes a day, but it's about building those tiny little habits that shift everything as you go forward.
And I gotta say, I can't think of anything I would rather do for 21 days than to connect with you and Chris. That would be an awesome start to a day for sure.
Wonderful. And you've got another one of your fans on here, Leanne.
Ah, Leanne, one of my favorite people in the meetings and events industry.
So, and also just to let you know, I mentioned this is streaming live to Facebook and to on YouTube. It's also on LinkedIn. There's a group called Leading and Meeting in Pandemics. It's going to get uploaded to that, and so you can just search for that. The other thing too is if you want to, as Jen mentioned, we're both doing similar work. If you want to check in for myself, you can schedule a free 20-minute virtual coffee via Zoom. Just go to callravi.com. That's CALLRAVI.com, and we can chat about what the challenges are and see whether I might be able to help you or maybe connect you with other resources that might help you move forward.
Yeah,
So,
that's, just on that, Ravi. So Ravi and I are both members of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, which means we have a huge network of really smart people that we know and we collaborate with. And so chances are, if we don't have the answer, we know someone who does.
absolutely. I mean, I do a huge amount. I'm sure you do, Jen, as well, of collaboration with our fellow CAPS members, and Patricia, who, as I
Yeah.
mentioned, I did a session a week or so ago, is another CAPS member. So if we don't have the expertise you want, we can absolutely connect you with that through CAPS and our resources there.
Because we can admit we don't know everything.
Yes.
And some days nothing, like I don't know anything, but and it can feel like that. But absolutely, it is who you know and who you can ask for help. And so, I would love to be considered one of the trusted advisors and to have that conversation with at any time.
Yeah, and I think it would be boring to know everything. I want to be learning every day and discovering. That's part of this, is you're creating new ways all the time.
Absolutely, that's the joy.
So thank you all for joining us. Truly appreciate it. Jen, I'm going to give you a high
Oh
five.
yeah. Oh, we practice this. Wait a minute, because it's backwards for me. No, it's this way.
Nope.
Okay, ready?
And
Go.
boom. There. All right.
have other
Thank you all
skills.
for tuning in, and we will. And if you're watching this after, put your comments in, please, and Jen and I will be checking in and be responding afterwards as well. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk with you soon.
Right. Thank you. Oh, where am I? Bye.
Bye.